And U.S. law enforcement arrested another Hispanic convert to Islamic extremism in a sting operation involving the plot to bomb a Maryland recruiting station, as described by a witness on WBAL-TV. All three such threats, and many similar ones around the world, have been clear for some time, as have the West's limited means of meeting them. But there are prospects for some hopeful counter-trends, according to a new book by Dr. Walid Phares, director of the Future Terrorism Project at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
It's called The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, from Simon & Schuster. And Dr. Phares joins us again now for your ears only. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Iran. At a conference this past week at your Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, President Obama's chief nuclear advisor talked about yet another escalation in sanctions. But some experts say more economic pain is not likely to sway the mullahs and could rally more popular support behind them. What's your view?
Well, in the essence, the struggle against the Iranian regime's nuclear plans is not going to be, hasn't been, and won't be unidimensional, meaning applying economic sanctions alone is not going to force the regime to basically get rid of its plan, because it will find other economic partners. It has other channels to a variety of other countries in the region. But without economic sanctions, military strikes or diplomatic pressures also cannot get to the goal. So what is needed now is a new architecture, first out of Washington, into Brussels with the Europeans, into as many partners in the international community to find all these multi-dimensional possibilities. Sanctions on the one hand, engagement in diplomatic activities on the other hand, but more importantly, I think at this point in time, is to engage with Iranian opposition, NGOs and people to put pressure on the regime.
What do you see as the origin and effectiveness of the Stuxnet computer worm that reportedly has interfered with the nuclear processing of Iranian centrifuges?
It will maybe take another future WikiLeaks wave to tell us more. We don't know. The effectiveness is clear. We've seen it through the statements by officials, not always very clear. We see the slow process now, but at the same time, when we analyze the origin, when we have to be very rational. Iran and Israel are in a state of confrontation. So the Israeli factor could be one, Western factor could be one. But let's not dismiss this possibility of having internal opposition, elements from what we've seen last year being a very large movement of opposition who are within the bureaucracy, within the technology of the bureaucracy, and could have been behind it as well.
Well, you've mentioned this twice now. Is there a chance for the youth and democracy forces in Iran to rise again after the suppression following last year's disputed election? Do they have a chance to pressure the regime on the nuclear issue, other issues?
Well, that's a good question, because before June of 2009, the massive demonstration, the 1.5 million people who marched through the streets of Tehran, before that revolt of 2009, there were always questions, would the youth who have revolted before in the late 90s and again in 2002, 2003, would organize such a thing? To me, as an observer of democratic developments in the region, when you see a movement of that size, that movement, even if suppressed, even if stopped for a while, is still going deeper, and I'm looking certainly at the age group. We're talking 60% below the age of 19 or 18, 55% or so female. So here you have the ingredients of a long-term society movement. Will it have a pressure on specifically the nuclear issue? Only if it wins. If it wins its round and perform reforms, then we can talk about a change in direction of the leadership of Iran.
Do you see any similar forces, demographic forces, within the Palestinian-controlled Gaza Strip and West Bank to affect Palestinian policy in its continuing wrestling match with the Israelis?
The Palestinian national community, both in Gaza and in the West Bank, has been historically, more than any other society in the Middle East, influenced and also contained and controlled in some segments by regimes. And that has been a debate within the Palestinians, the Syrian regime, the Iranian regime. In the past, it used to be Abdel Nasser. So the problem with Palestinian politics, number one, is their independence from these regimes. It is ironic that the more independent they would go, that's what they tried to do in the 1990s, the more they will be able to put international pressure on Israel in this case, to get to where the Palestinian leadership want. But if they are connected strategically, as is the case with Hamas, with Hezbollah in Iran, it will be less likely that they could get to their goals as soon as they want.
Where else do you see Islamic forces gathering that would oppose jihad and dictatorship? And will the process be peaceful like the fall of the Soviet Union?
Well, in my book, The Coming Revolution, I basically show two maps. One map, which is the rise of the jihadists themselves across the board in the region, but the other map that is not well seen in the West and the American public as well is the multiplicity of civil society uprisings. These are the movements which we could qualify as Muslim-majority countries, Muslim-majority societies on the rise. One certainly is Iran. Two is the Cedars Revolution in Lebanon, which put 1.5 million people on the streets of Beirut in 2005 and continue to organize itself in NGOs. Three, let's not forget about Sudan. You have the Darfur situation, which is still on. These are black Muslim populations rising for their freedom. The south of Sudan is going for self-determination. There is another emerging area in northern Africa, in Algeria, the Kabyle population, the Berber population, who are calling for referendum also as of March, April. But as these ethnic-based movements are going up, you're going to see also across the board gender, meaning women's movement and students' movement, artists, even cab drivers, but you can see more so of these online, on Facebook. So the movement is there, and we're going to watch it, how it's going to grow.
Dr. Walid Phares is director of the Future Terrorism Project at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. His new book is The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, from Simon & Schuster.